If you've been in the horse industry for all of about 5 minutes, you've probably received some toxic advice, and I say that with air quotes, whether that's about finances, whether that's about health, whether that's about career choices and why you should or shouldn't be a horse professional. And the ironic thing is that many of us as horse professionals, we get into this for the horses and the passion that we have, but then some reason we get turned into therapists and psychologists and life coaches, and it's definitely not what we signed up for, right? If you've been in a horse professional for a while, you probably understand this. If you're not a horse professional yet, well, there's your heads up. And here's the thing, the quote unquote toxic advice that I'm talking about into those three categories, that's not specific to the horse industry. I just got to be very upfront about this. That's life in general. That's humans being humans. Many people just give out bad advice, right? Maybe we turn that into a whole series of all the worst advice that we've received as horse professionals in the industry, coming up and going through that process of all the things that people have told us we should do that were really bad ideas, right? And maybe we turn that into a series to head that off. But I'm not talking about today. We're not talking about finances. We're not talking about career advice. We're not talking about health advice today. We're talking about something that's actually far more important, okay? And whether you're a horse professional yourself, you're an aspiring horse professional, you're currently in the middle of your career, or maybe you're not even in the horse industry and you're like, I'm just kind of curious what this guy has to say. This applies to everybody. Okay, this applies to everybody because most of us will make this decision in our life. And I've seen, and if you are somebody that you're like, hey, I want to be the best that I can be. I want to live up to my fullest potential. I want to be as successful as I possibly can. I want to become the best version of myself. If you make this decision that I'm going to talk about today in this video, well, you'll be able to do that. But the thing that inspired this video is people that have made this decision very poorly. And when people have made this decision that we're talking about today, that is far more impactful than your health, than your finances, than your career. Because guess what? This one decision affects all of those three things together and much, much more in your life. And when this one decision is made poorly, it can sink you straight to the bottom. And there's proof, there's evidence. We're going to talk about that. So with that being said, let's not wait anymore and let's get into today's video. I'm going to be really candid. I'm going to share some personal things that I've done in hopes that it might help somebody that's watching this. Maybe it'll help you as you're watching this video. And the only thing that I ask y'all is if you're brand new here, by the way, my name's Colton Woods. I want to welcome you guys to the channel. And the way we do it around here is use that comment section as a conversation. Right, if you agree with something I say, if you disagree with something I say, share it in the comments. Be respectful. Act like an adult. But I like to go into the comments and chat with you guys, as well as to use those comments for future video ideas. So I do watch them, right? You're not talking on the deaf ears there. And if you get anything of value and you want to stick around, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. It does seriously help. And I always like to make sure that these videos get to y'all because I put them out there simply to try to help as much as possible. Because as I shared, together we rise, right? The better that we are as individuals, the better we can serve our horses, right? The better that we can serve our families, the better we can serve our communities. If you're a horse professional, the better that your business runs, the better you can take care of everyone else around you. Because at the core of everything that I do, y'all, is that horsemanship's not just a way to train a horse. It's everything we do with our horses and in our own lives. It's the physical development, the mental development, the emotional development, the spiritual development. And when we crack all of that down to what really makes a difference, it all starts with decisions. And that's what we're diving into today's video, is arguably one of the most impactful, if not the most impactful decision that many of us will make in our life. And I've thought a lot about how I was going to actually phrase this. And I'm going to say it just very bluntly, very plainly. And we're just going to roll with that, all right? So here we go. You ready? Don't marry a loser. Don't marry a loser. Because when you're talking to people that actually care about you, they tell you what you need to hear. And we have to be very mindful that we don't surround ourselves with people that just tell us what we want to hear. They just pander to our feelings. They're constantly changing their answers based on what they think will make us happy. And we need to actually have people in our life that look out for our best interests. And they say what needs to be said. And that leads right into making sure that you make the decision to do life with the most important person that you'll do life with, and that is your spouse. We have to be smart about who we choose to marry, who we choose to spend the rest of our life with, because a great spouse can take you straight to the top. They can push you, they can support you, they can be there through all these times to tell you what you need to know, to tell you what you actually need to hear, so that you can become the best version of yourself, to fulfill your entire purpose. Or you can marry a loser who drags you down, who doesn't want to see you fulfill your fullest potential, right? You can marry someone, and there's losers of all forms. There are selfish losers. There are petty losers, right? There are insecure losers, right? There's people of all types that will hold you back for their own selfish gain, for their own insecurity, right? Because of their own limiting beliefs. They will hold you back from being the best version of you. My wife and I, when we got married and we were dating, we still hold true to this principle today, is that we are strong. We are great independently, but we are way better together. And that has influenced every part of our life. That has influenced us from dating and being two individuals to becoming married and becoming a couple. That has influenced our business decisions in not just running two independent businesses, but saying, you know what? God brought us together for a reason. And stepping into going, why don't we take what we both do very well and bring that together within one business, right? And it's being able to marry somebody that pushes you to be better, that supports you, that is there for you, right? But we have to make sure, because here's the fact of the matter, is that we can look on the up and up, and you can look, maybe you're dating somebody, or you're looking at maybe getting married, you're already married. We can look at somebody through rose-colored glasses and go, hey, yeah, I can come up with all these reasons why this is the right person. But we have to be objective about this. And I don't know if it's just society or if it's culture. Frankly, I don't know that I've been alive long enough to have enough decades under my belt to know, is this just a trend in society? Was it the same way back in the 40s and the 50s and the 30s and the 20s? But people now more than ever seem to be getting married very casually. Because we're like, oh, well, if it doesn't work out, we can always just get a divorce and I'll just go date somebody else and go on. And that's not, we're not going to get into the biblical ties of marriage, but this is being able to marry somebody is a very strategic decision. Some people go out and get married as if they're just going out and they're buying a new set of clothes. That sounds kind of funny to think about a little bit, but you might know people like that, and it doesn't mean that they're getting a new set of clothes every weekend per se, but they're very casual. There's like, oh yeah, it's, if they get divorced, it's no big deal. And that's not saying that people get divorced 15 times because they change their clothes 15 times, but it's the level of the magnitude, the level of the decision, the gravity that goes into, I'm making a decision to commit my life to spend it with this person for the rest of my life. For my wife and I personally, divorce isn't an option. Okay? It's not an option. We don't throw that word does not get thrown around here. It's not even part of the conversation. Okay? It's not an option. We made a commitment to each other. Right? And some people get weird and squirmish, and that might show up in the comments about that. It's like, oh, it's not an option. And so some people might point finger at me like, you're not going to let her out, or if she feels suppressed. And it's like, that's a whole bunch of garbage. It's a decision. You make a decision to say, you know what? That's not an option, right? But on the front end, before you get married, before you get engaged, you have to be strategic. And this is going to get a little funny here in a second. I know that this is very serious right now, but I got made fun of a lot in college, which is where my wife and I met, by some of my buddies because of my process for dating. Okay. And frankly, this video is really much there for the people that are single horse professionals or single in general, because I hope that this helps you in some way. Okay. I hope that it helps you. as you go through life you approach making that decision of finding the person that you're going to marry, and making sure that you're making sure it's a smart decision and that you're finding someone that can help you become the best version of yourself. Because if you're the best version of yourself, you can better serve your spouse. You can better serve your kids. You can better serve your community. If you run a business, you can better serve your business. But being able to, you will spend the vast majority of your time with this person. And in fact, there was a study that I heard about just the other day that was discussing the fact that they evaluated what matters more in people's lives. Is it workplace happiness or is it marriage happiness, right? And it was like, do you enjoy doing what you do for a living, or is your marriage working well? And to some of us, it might seem kind of obvious, but at the same time, it was the gravity of how much of a multiplier it was. It was that marriage happiness was 4 times more impactful, more heavier, more important than workplace happiness. They were evaluating, like, if your marriage is off kilter, how impactful it is on life, versus if your workplace is off kilter and it's not going well, how much does that throw you off, versus when your marriage is going really well or work is going really well, how much does that help you? And marriage is 4 times more impactful than even your job. So as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, we're like, yeah, your business could be crushing it, could be going super well, but if your marriage is on the rocks and it's not fun to go home, it's going to impact your business in dramatic fashion. And having helped a lot of horse professionals build, grow, and scale their horse businesses, one of the biggest limiting factors that we have run into is the fact that people have decided to marry somebody who doesn't actually support them in the things that they want to go do. And that doesn't mean that they always have to say yes, right? That doesn't mean that your spouse should not always say yes. But when you get down and you get to sit down and talk with somebody and they're like, everything in my soul, in my purpose, tells me that this is what I should be doing. This is who I'm meant to be serving. But yet your spouse is not in alignment. Because and here's the thing, people grow, people change, okay? But when you really look at how those relationships are formed, it is no question in my mind that those decisions were not made at optimal times. And so I think it's really important, and I only like to speak I'm speaking from observation of, like, hey, when these people married the wrong people, seemingly the wrong people, okay, it has held them back dramatically. It has put them into an absolute dumpster fire. Some of them, you see years later, they get divorced and they're like, oh my gosh, that was a terrible thing, right? Because they made a bad decision, right? And so we can learn from observing from others, right? And specifically within the horse industry, but even business in general, you need to have someone that's going to stick with you through the good, the bad, the ugly. Things will get rough. Whether you run a business or you don't run a business, things in life will get tough. And you have to know, like, I've got someone that has a backbone, that actually loves me, that no matter what, right? The marriage comes first. Marriage comes first, then the kids come, then the work comes, right? Of course, you got God at the top, you got country in there too, right? All those things are important. I went into college with the whole purpose to get out of college. I went there because my parents were like, you need an education and no one can take your education if something happens to you, all that stuff, right? Wouldn't change it, but wouldn't do it again, right? Very thankful I met my wife there. It led to a lot of good things in life. Because I was so hyper-focused on getting through college and getting out, and graduating a 4-year program in 3 years, like, I was packing hours in. Don't get me wrong, had a lot of fun in college, but wasn't really like looking to date by any stretch, okay? I was just like, boom, career focused. This is what I'm doing. I'm not saying that's the right thing. It's just where my mindset was at that time. And when I did go on the occasional date with a gal, we go out to eat and we go somewhere where we could actually have a decent conversation. I think my wife and our first date was actually like Olive Garden, right? You can hear an Olive Garden. I didn't go to a bar or anything like that. Not to say that we wouldn't go to parties and stuff, but when you want to go to get to know somebody, you want to be able to sit down and have a conversation. And I kind of had a running list of things in my head that I'm like, hey, these are non-negotiables. And that's when my buddies really started making fun of me. And this is probably even more of a weed out question now than it was then, but it certainly was then too. And I just sit there and we'd be chatting, and I'm like, so can you cook? And they'd be like, what? I'm like, yeah, like, can you cook? And literally, I had a date with one guy. She goes, I burn water in the microwave. And I was like, all right. I didn't say it just like this. Like, we had the rest of the meal, but in my head, right, this is what I was thinking, was like, we're gonna be good friends. That's it. That's where this train stops, because it's just like, I burn water in the microwave, and I would follow up and be like, oh, okay, like macaroni is kind of a issue. That's all right. We ate a lot of macaroni in college, so I was like, do you have any aspirations of learning how to cook? No, like, I just eat out. We always ate out growing up, and like, no, like, I just eat out and blah 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 blah. And whether you can call me a tight ass, or the fact that it wasn't really the fact that I am kind of a tight ass, but at the end of the day, here's the thing: I grew up eating good. My mom cooks magnificently well. Okay, I grew up eating good. I planned to die eating good. For me, that was a non-negotiable. Okay, is that I like to come home, or we get done with work, and know that there's healthy food on the table that didn't come from the local diner. Okay, that's just me. That was one of my non-negotiables. Is like, I want to find a woman that can cook. And here's the fact: even my wife, she cooked a little bit, still learning to cook, but she didn't cook a lot when we met. Okay, but she enjoyed cooking. She enjoyed learning how to cook. She just hadn't done it that much. Her mom didn't really cook that much when she grew up. And so she's like, but her grandmother's cooked a lot. And so she's like, yeah, I kind of enjoy it. And she was wanting to learn how to cook and all that sort of thing. So it wasn't like my wife was like a 5-star Gordon Ramsay chef when we met, right? But when I would go talk to some of these gals, they were like, and some of them were like, oh yeah, I can cook a little bit. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Okay. Do you want to have a family? You don't want to have any kids? And we're like, no, I don't want any kids. I just want to go, have a free lifestyle. I don't want to be tied down with my kids. And it's like, I'm out, right? I want to have a lot of kids. I want to have as many kids as God's going to bless me with. And having these non-negotiables, right? And it's like, where do you want to live, or what kind of lifestyle do you want to have, right? And being able to, like, you have to make judgment-based decisions based on where someone is currently at when you're dating them. And so a lot of people would go like, those are surface level questions. But guess what? If that gal can't cook and doesn't want to learn how to cook, and I agree to marry her, I've agreed to marry someone that I full well know, or should have found out, that they burn water in the microwave. And you can't go, like, if you make that decision, that's not terms for you to divorce them 15 years later when you're tired of eating pizza that tastes like cardboard, right? Like, it's not, you have to do your due diligence on the front end. I'm going to really out myself here in a second. I'm going to go a layer deeper of how I actually thought about this. But we need to be making, especially as a horse professional, you need to be thinking about, is this person able to support me and help me grow? Okay? Because when my wife and I we're getting to know each other, and I don't know, we probably just started dating about this point. And I was in a fraternity, she was in a sorority. We're ag-based fraternity and sorority. So I was basically living in a house with a bunch of farm kids, and she was in a sorority with a bunch of girls that grew up on farms. And so it was a unique deal. It wasn't like your typical college frat type stuff. She was doing their graphic design. She was making all their t-shirts, and she was doing their flyers for their recruitment and that sort of thing. And in my mind, like, I'm going to go be a horse trainer. Like, I'm going to go build a horse training program. That's what I know what I'm going to go do. I'm going to hit the road. I'm going to do the clinician thing. And that's the direction I was going. And when I was learning that, like, hey, she likes graphics and she's built their website, I'm like, hey, that can be really helpful to me. She has skills that can benefit me. And someone's like, you shouldn't look at a relationship as transactional. It's like, I looked at it like a business decision, very much like a business decision. You have to be in love with the person. You have to love them. You have to care about them. There has to be the intimate connection, right? There has to be the actual relationship portion. But there's so much, when you commit to marrying somebody, there's so much, every part of your life becomes connected. Why wouldn't you make sure that all of those things that are going to be factors, what they do for a living, what they enjoy doing hobby-wise, the number of kids that they have the desire to. And guess what? We all know that things change. Things can change drastically. Gosh knows how much I've changed since we very first started dating. And thank the Lord that I've changed in the ways that I have changed, right? And my wife's probably still waiting me to change some more, right? But we grow together. You do understand that in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years from now, you're going to be different people. But when you're making the decision then to date somebody, to get engaged, to marry somebody, you have to go through and it's like doing a pre-purchase exam, for a lack of a better horse word, right? You have to go through, and it's like, not everything's going to be perfect. Not everything's going to be exact. Like, you can't be looking for everything to be lined up just perfect, right? But you certainly can have a baseline of decisions of like, these are the must-haves that I have to have. And that's essentially what I did. Like, I could rephrase that as like, I basically had a pre-purchase list of like, hey, if she didn't check these certain boxes, I wasn't interested. And that was having kids, being able to cook, wanting to be a homemaker, essentially. Okay. I don't like, my wife works really hard, right? And for me, it wasn't like, oh, I didn't necessarily want somebody that was just a stay-at-home mom per se. And that's probably influenced by the fact that my mom worked really hard growing up too, right along with my dad building a business. Now I will say that like, I would love for Meredith, my wife, to not have to work, right? But what we do is so interconnected that her input, her genius zone is integral into what we do, into serving the people that we're meant to be serving within Horse Business Manager and Horse Business Solutions, and those two businesses that we built together, right? But if you have your pre-purchase list, you have to have some baselines, right? And in the beginning, like, my wife grew up as an only child. And so she wasn't so sure, like, how many kids she wanted to have. She figured like one was good. And she had her reasons for only wanting one, because she knew the benefits of growing up as an only child, right? I grew up with a younger brother, but I always wanted as many kids as God would bless us with. I don't really have a number on it. And so that was one box, to be fully transparent, that was a little bit open-ended, was a little bit of an unknown factor. And it was a big one to leave unknown, but there was so much that was right. You could even go down to the extent, this is just personal, this is kind of funny, and people always point this out. In fact, someone had to tell me about this before I even realized it, which my name's Colton, Colton. Her name's Meredith, Maredith. So it's Colt and Mare, right? And it's like, that's destiny, right? And you can definitely look at it that way. But the important part is that you can't be afraid to have non-negotiables. And you have to be willing to have those hard conversations, right? And I've watched, I've worked for people that had gotten engaged, or had friends that have gotten engaged, and in the engagement process themselves, then they start asking the harder questions, and the engagement breaks off, right? Because they start asking the harder questions because they realize that they're moving towards a lifelong commitment. And why not have those harder conversations on the upfront, right? And that means that you really have to take the time as an individual to work on yourself, to get clear on what do you think you want. It can change over time, but what at your core of who you are, what do you really want, right? And it's not just what we want, but what do we need? And we got to work on ourselves, because we can't just be like, well, I slack in this department, so I'll marry somebody that'll offset it. It's like, no, like, you need to work on yourself and be the best individual that you possibly can be, so that way you can attract someone else that is committed to being the best version of themselves, because that's how this works, right? Like attracts like. If you work hardcore on who you are as a person, and you work on bettering yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, right? You got to be you, but you got to work on those things, and whether it doesn't matter whether you're married or one, you just work on being the best version of yourself, and you can attract someone else will be attracted to that, because they too are working on being the best version of themselves, right? And when you have two people that are working on being the very best version of themselves, and you put them together, you've got what they call a power couple, right? Is what people call it, right? And it's because you like attracts like, and someone that's really hardcore working on themselves and being the best, they're not attracted to someone else that's being a slouch, right? That's being lazy, that's a complainer, that's a whiner, that has a victim mentality, right? And so you attract a higher quality person, and you have a perspective to go, I'm not going to put up with less. And I think that's a good thing. Because when you work on yourself, you're gonna be able to attract that other person, and it's, together you both can rise. Together you rise. The better that you work on yourself individually. You can't just work out because you are a guy and you're like, I want to attract a girl that wants a six-pack. It's like, no, you got to work on your physical health because you want to be healthy. You got to work on your spiritual health because you want a closer relationship with God, right? You've got to work on your emotional regulation, your emotional fitness. That way you can stay calm in intense and tough situations and you don't lash out and those types of things. And it comes down to us working on ourselves. And so, we've definitely gone deep on this particular thing, but it comes down, like we said, we make 30 to 35,000 decisions every single day. But there's very few decisions in our life that will change the entire trajectory of our life. And who we choose to marry and how we go about that process of finding that person and evaluating that person, right? You can call it evaluation, you can call it getting to know that person, is absolutely critical. Because as I've helped other horse professionals, as I've witnessed and watched people, colleagues and friends, and just people in life in general, one of the biggest things that holds people back is marrying the wrong person. And people can go, well, how can you know that they married the wrong person? You're not God and you don't know. And it's like, listen, when you sit down there and you either watch somebody or you actually, and I've gotten to know some of these people, gotten to really know, and you listen to them and you can feel what they're saying right from their soul of what they're meant to be doing, what they're supposed to be doing. And the freaking parachute behind them that's not saving them, but holding them back is that person. Few unique occasions I've gotten to talk with people about this kind of in depth. And you get to understand where they were at in life when they married that person. What type of lifestyle were they living? What type of decisions were they making when they married that person? And then how much they've grown since then. And oftentimes the other person that they married hasn't grown with them, right? But when they got together, neither one of them were growing. Like attracted like. They were both maybe being sedentary and a little bit lazy and just going through the 9 to 5 motions, and they weren't really pushing forward. But then one of them starts to really step into personal growth, starts to really pursue their purpose, and the other person is still stuck in that lifestyle that they were living 10 years ago. They grow apart, and you're like, well, people change. Well, people change. It's like, yeah, people do change. But if you're in a sedentary, non-productive, not very intentional, just very much in the moment, I'm going to find somebody I love and I'm going to enjoy this right now, and you're living a life of just comfort and ease, is that the best time to be making a decision about who to spend the rest of your life with? I sure as heck don't think so. Because we're meant to create, we're meant to grow, we're meant to go out and do the work to fulfill our purpose, and we're not meant to be sedentary. We're not meant to stay constantly in these modern states of comfort that we've gotten to know. We're not meant to do those things. And I'm not going to crack this open into a whole nother conversation that I could off of that comment. I think it's hypercritical that when we're looking at selecting who we're going to spend the rest of our life with, that we're in a creation state. We're working on creating the best version of ourselves. We're on a progressive state of making sure that we're working on ourselves today with a long-term vision. And then we're asking ourselves, hey, does this person match? Does this person fit with the long-term vision that I have? All right. And I'm going to be a little bit naive about them. I think this makes common sense. I think this is fairly logical, but I think there might be a lot of people that disagree with this, and that's totally fine. I want you guys to be respectful, and you can share it in the comments down below. All right. But who you commit to spend the rest of your life with is the keys to a better future, or it's the keys to a dungeon. It's the keys to better health, whether that's physical health, mental health, emotional health, financial health. It's the keys to success. It's the keys to fulfilling your purpose. That one decision impacts all of that. It will not only impact you, but it'll impact the future generations of you. You decide to have kids with that person. Who you decided to have kids with, those are your kids. And if you make the decision to spend it with somebody that is not in alignment, you've made a decision to bring your future generations into the world with someone that is not in alignment. That's a key decision. It's on you. Those kids aren't in the world yet, right? If you haven't had kids, and you can make the decision to make sure that you marry the right person that is in alignment, what you're looking for, what you want and what you need. God wants to give us what we want, but he's there to also give us what we need. We have to be wise enough to use our free will to make the critical decisions that we need to make sure that we are matching ourselves with the right person. Everyone's like, well, if you got married, it was meant to be. I don't know, so I think that. I think that some people make bad decisions because they're not in a good mental place, physical place, emotional place, spiritual place when they go to make those decisions. And then when those people go to grow out of those places is when they realize that was a bad decision. I do this video to merely try to help you. Don't make that mistake. Be particular, be picky, vet them out, whatever term you want to use. Know what you want. Make sure you spend the time not rushing it, but really diving into not just the things that you want, but you have to understand that what you want, what you're looking for are pure and important things of, you can decide whether you do or don't want kids. Okay. But if you're like, hey, I do want kids, it's important you find somebody that does want kids, right? If it's the cooking thing, if it's a lifestyle thing, you need to have those difficult conversations, right? You need to know where people stand morally, on their values, on controversial issues, right? About who you're comfortable with being around your kids, right? Who you're not comfortable being around kids if you had kids, right? Where you're willing to live, where you're not willing to live. Going through all of these types of things, going through all of these decisions, and I say all of them, as many of them as you can. Go for the heavy hitter ones. Don't be afraid to say, hey, we'll be good friends, right? Because you're not looking for everybody, you're looking for one. You're looking for one person. And there's a business saying that some will, some won't, so what next? And I sure as heck didn't know that in the dating scene. But guess what? It's so true. You're not looking for them all to say yes. You're looking for the one. And I should have said this earlier, but like I've always been of the opinion that you need to date to marry. Right? If you're going to date somebody, it's because you believe that they could be the right person for you to potentially marry. And the second you get a sniff and a whiff of somebody, you're like, nope, this isn't the person. Stop wasting each other's time. That doesn't mean they're a bad person. Doesn't mean they're a bad person at all. It just means they're not the person that I'm meant to be with for the rest of my life. But I can look back on some of the longer term relationships that I did have before I got to college, and all of those were like, yeah, I could see myself with that person at that time in my life, right? And then as paths split, we all went different directions, okay? And fortunately, those things ended on good terms because in a way, like I dated other gals that were mature. They realized like, hey, okay, yeah, this just isn't who I'm meant to be with, and we can still go on. We can still be, cordial, and we can still be friends. We all of us ran in similar friend groups as everybody did in high school, right? But you're not looking for a bunch of them. You're dating to find the one, right? And I think one of the things is that some people date for a long time, and then it doesn't work out. And it's like, you probably could have just asked some more critical thinking questions on the front end and saved yourself a couple of years, right? And so I'm taking the time. I know this video is kind of dragging out, but I want to take the time to talk through this because my hope is that there is one person that might have made it this far that finds this helpful, that might be able to help you find the right person or not make the mistake of marrying the wrong person. Because I heard this years ago, there's like marriage becomes a business when divorce comes into play or something. That's paraphrased, but it's just basically the context that everyone gets married under the context of love. But then when divorce comes into the picture, then everything gets business-like and it gets brutal and it gets gruesome and it's really gnarly and nasty, right? And you don't want that to be the case. And we've seen that in the horse industry with multiple different types of people, right? Where it does turn into business and it pulls a business down because now you're giving half your shit away to somebody, whether it doesn't matter if you're male or female, like you end up splitting everything down, and now you're set way back because you don't have nearly the resources that you need to continue growing your business. And we run, as a horse professional, this is a very expensive business to be in. You need those resources. And if you're going along building a career as an entrepreneur and then you get divorced and that pulls you down, it can completely derail your entire career. Very few people can rebuild and keep going and stay on track to fulfill what they're meant to fulfill. Versus if you pick the right freaking person, you probably will be able to build, grow, and scale and be able to achieve more than you ever thought possible. And that's probably the magic thing that I want to end with, is that, you know, I've experienced this with my wife particularly, is that, you know, I had a vision of where I wanted to go. And I, as the husband in the family, I have a vision of where our family is growing, but that vision has continually grown, and it's grown because of her, right? And it's grown because of my desire to provide a lifestyle for my wife and for my kids. But it's also grown because what she is, with her skill sets and the things that she does well, she's opened doors to be able to show what else is all possible. And so if you would have told me 10 or 15 years ago that we would be doing what we're doing today, I would never believe it, because I don't think that I would have thought it was possible. But that's the power of picking the right person, is they open doors for you and in your life together that you never thought possible, and maybe individually you never thought were possible. But when you're together, you're better together, and much more is possible. So I spent a fair bit of time talking about the negative side of picking a wrong person, and we did talk a little bit about the upside of picking the right person. And there's nothing better. There's nothing better. My wife and I work shoulder to shoulder pretty much all day, whether it's raising kids, working on our businesses together. We both work from home, right? We did that before COVID, before it was cool, right? And we wouldn't do it any other way. Everyone else has their own dynamic. I'm not saying that this is the dynamic that is supposed to work. It's like, you got to find the right person for you. And you got to be particular, and you got to be picky, and you don't rush that. But when you find that person, you move. You move quickly. When you're like, this is it. This is the person. Why would you wait to get married that long? Do it. Frankly, I was like, if I don't really have regrets, but I'm like, you know what? The moment that I realized I was going to marry my wife, it took me 9 months before I had the ring and I was going to ask her dad, and that I actually proposed. It took like 9 or 10 months. And looking back on it, I've been like, the moment that I knew that was the case, I should have done. I looking back on it, I've been like, I needed to have that conversation with her dad that week. And then, you know, the ring deal was a financial deal because I was brokered in a joke at that point. But there was no reason to wait that long. We were still dating during that period. But in my mind, I'm like, knowing how amazing it has been to be married to her and to be able to build what we've gotten together. In my mind, I'm like, man, if I could have had those extra 9 or 10 months like that too. And it's just one of those things I share here to wrap this up, is like, when you find that person, go for it. Do it. Don't wait. Don't worry about what society says. You know, you don't have to take a year or 2 years to plan a freaking wedding. It doesn't have to, you know, you can have a ceremony, right? But like, and and we're not going to get into marriage advice here, because, you know, when when Meredith was planning the wedding, I'm like, this is your deal. Like, guys, when you do get engaged, let them plan the wedding. Let them do what they want, you know, for the most part. Like, that has been their girl childhood dream. Let them fulfill it, right? But as a guy, when we're making that decision of when we're going to propose, from man to man, for anybody watching this, is like, do it as soon as you know. Do it as soon as you know. Now she can get to plan the wedding a little sooner, right? Do it as soon as you know. There's no good reason to wait. As soon as you know, take the time to go ask your dad. Make sure you get the ring, right? And then ask that question. Start that next chapter of your life as soon as you possibly can. Because when you know you've found the right person, why would you wait? Why would you delay it? I've thought about that a lot, just in retrospect, right? And I've got 2 daughters. Maybe God will bless us with a son. And I can guarantee you, unless something radically changes my life, that will be something that I will share with him. Is like, when you find that woman that God has made for you, that you're intended to be with, you'll never wish that you waited longer. If you know in your soul that is who you're in, and you've done your due diligence, you've been wise about it. With that being said, y'all, we're going to wrap this one up. This one went a little bit longer than I intended, but I hope that it's helpful. And please let me know if it is, because this is quite a bit different. But these are meaningful conversations that we need to have. These are the conversations that we need to have. I'm willing to have them because I want to help you guys. And so with that being said, y'all, if you want to see more videos like this, whether it's horsemanship related, personal development related, growing your horse business, be sure hit that subscribe button down below. If you're a horse professional wanting strategic stuff to grow your horse business, be sure pop over to our Horse Business Solutions YouTube channel. That's all horse business there. That's all you'll find. There's not personal takes like this on there. It's just strategic business development over there. You can find that there. With that being said, y'all, I hope you have a very blessed day, and we'll see you on the next video.